I still remember the way the morning sun filtered through the blinds that day, casting long golden stripes across my desk. It was supposed to be just another Monday. I had my coffee in hand, my to-do list ready, and a quiet sense of pride in my work. For 7 years, I'd poured my heart into this company. I'd built relationships, solved problems, and, most importantly, earned the trust of every single client I managed. But as I sat there, reviewing the latest client reports, I had no idea that my entire world was about to be turned upside down. It started with a simple email. The subject line was cold and direct. Meeting with management, 10 a.m. No details, no explanation, just a time and a place. My stomach twisted with unease. I'd never been called into a meeting like this before, not without warning. I tried to shake off the nerves. Maybe it was just a routine check-in. Maybe they wanted to discuss a new project. But deep down, something felt off. At 9:55, I made my way down the hall, my footsteps echoing on the polished floors. The office was unusually quiet, as if everyone sensed something was about to happen. When I reached the conference room, I paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and pushed open the door. Inside, the CEO's son, Brandon, sat at the head of the table. He was only a few years younger than me, but he carried himself with the smug confidence of someone who'd never had to earn his place. His father, the CEO, was nowhere to be seen. Brandon didn't bother to stand. He just looked up at me with a thin, practiced smile. "Take a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I sat, my heart pounding in my chest. He wasted no time. "We're making some changes around here," he began, his tone flat, "and unfortunately, your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. "Is this a joke?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, still wearing that infuriating smile. "No joke. You've done good work, but we're moving in a different direction. HR will be in touch about your severance." I felt the room spin. 7 years, gone in a single sentence. No warning, no explanation, just gone. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Brandon had made up his mind. I could see it in his eyes. To him, I was just another obstacle to be cleared away. As I stood to leave, he added, almost as an afterthought, "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just pack your things and go." I walked out of that room in a daze, my mind racing. How could this happen? What had I done to deserve this? And why did it feel so personal? But as I packed up my desk, a new feeling began to take root, one that would change everything. It was anger. Pure, burning anger. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I wouldn't let Brandon get away with this. The hours after I was fired felt like a blur. I moved through the office like a ghost, gathering my things while my co-workers avoided my gaze. Some offered awkward smiles, others whispered behind my back. I could feel the weight of their pity, and it stung more than I expected. I tried to keep my head high, but inside I was crumbling. 7 years of loyalty, erased in a single morning. I kept replaying Brandon's words in my mind, each time feeling the sting of betrayal a little deeper. As I packed the last of my things into a cardboard box, I glanced around the office one final time. My eyes landed on the wall of client photos, smiling faces, handshakes, memories of deals closed and problems solved. Those clients weren't just names on a spreadsheet. They were people I'd fought for. People who trusted me. And that's when it hit me. Brandon might have fired me, but he couldn't erase the relationships I'd built. He couldn't take away the trust I'd earned. If anything, he'd just handed me the greatest weapon I could ever ask for. I left the office that day with more than just a box of personal items. I left with a plan. But first, I needed to understand why this had happened. Why had Brandon targeted me? Was it personal or just business? I started reaching out to a few trusted colleagues, hoping for answers. It didn't take long to piece together the truth. Brandon had been pushing for more control ever since his father announced his retirement plans. He wanted to prove himself, to show the board he could run the company. And in his mind, that meant getting rid of anyone who might challenge his authority, including me. I was collateral damage in his quest for power. The realization made my anger burn even hotter. I'd given everything to this company, and this was how I was repaid? Cast aside so the CEO's son could play boss? Number. I wouldn't let it end like this. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the list of clients I'd managed over the years. 41 names, 41 relationships, 41 reasons not to give up. I started making calls. I didn't tell them what had happened. Not yet. Instead, I checked in, asked about their families, their businesses, their needs. I listened, just as I always had. And as I spoke to each one, I realized something important. They didn't care about the company. They cared about me. They trusted me. And that trust was something Brandon could never buy. As the days passed, my plan began to take shape. I would start my own firm, a place where clients came first, where loyalty and hard work were valued. I would show Brandon what real leadership looked like. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. The company had resources, lawyers, and a reputation. I was just one person, starting from scratch. Still, I had something they didn't, the truth. And I was ready to use it. The first morning after I was fired, I woke up before dawn. My mind was racing, but for the first time in days, I felt a sense of purpose. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was someone with a plan. I sat at my kitchen table, a notebook open in front of me, and started writing down everything I knew. Every client's name, every project, every little detail that made our relationship special. I remembered birthdays, anniversaries, even the names of their kids and pets. These weren't just business contacts. They were people who trusted me with their livelihoods. I knew I couldn't just call them up and ask them to leave the company. That would be too obvious, too risky. Instead, I decided to play the long game. I would reach out, check in, and let them know I was thinking of them. I would remind them, in subtle ways, of the value I brought to their businesses. The first call was the hardest. My hands shook as I dialed the number, my heart pounding in my chest. What if they didn't care? What if they sided with the company? But as soon as I heard the familiar voice on the other end, my nerves faded away. "Hey, it's me," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just wanted to check in, see how things are going." There was a pause, then a warm laugh. "It's good to hear from you. We were just talking about you the other day. How's everything on your end?" I hesitated, not wanting to reveal too much. "Things are changing. But I'm still here if you ever need anything." We talked for nearly an hour, catching up on business and life. By the end of the call, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. I spent the rest of the day making more calls, sending emails, and reconnecting with old contacts. Each conversation gave me a little more confidence, a little more strength. But I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. That night, I reached out to an old friend, someone I trusted more than anyone. Her name was Maya, and she'd been my right hand for years before she left the company to start her own consulting business. If anyone understood what I was going through, it was her. We met at a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. I told her everything about the firing, the betrayal, and my plan to start over. She listened quietly, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she smiled. "I'm in," she said without hesitation. "Let's show them what real loyalty looks like." With Maya by my side, I felt unstoppable. We spent hours brainstorming, mapping out our strategy, and dreaming about the future. For the first time since I was fired, I felt hope. But I also knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Maya and I worked around the clock, setting up our new firm from scratch. We found a tiny office space, just 2 rooms and a leaky ceiling, but it was ours. We bought secondhand furniture, set up laptops, and printed business cards with our new logo. Every day, we reached out to clients, offering advice, support, and a listening ear. We never asked them to leave the company outright. Instead, we focused on building trust, showing them that we were still the same people they'd relied on for years. But word travels fast in the business world. It wasn't long before Brandon found out what we were doing. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line made my stomach drop. Cease and desist. I opened it, my hands trembling. The message was cold and threatening, filled with legal jargon and warnings. Brandon accused me of stealing clients, violating non-compete agreements, and damaging the company's reputation. He demanded that I stop contacting clients immediately or face legal action. For a moment, I felt the old fear creeping back in. What if he was right? What if I lost everything before I even got started? But then I remembered why I was doing this. I remembered the way Brandon had looked at me in that conference room, as if I was nothing. I remembered the clients who had called to check on me, the friends who had offered their support. I wasn't going to let him scare me off. I forwarded the email to Maya, who called me within minutes. "Don't let him get in your head," she said firmly. "He's bluffing. He knows the clients trust you more than him. That's why he's scared." Her words gave me strength. I decided to fight back, not with anger or threats, but with integrity. I sent a reply to Brandon, keeping my tone calm and professional. I explained that I had not violated any agreements, that I was simply maintaining relationships I had built over years of hard work. I reminded him that clients had the right to choose who they worked with. I hit send, my heart pounding. I knew this was just the beginning of a much bigger battle. Over the next few days, the pressure mounted. Brandon started calling clients directly, trying to convince them to stay. He offered discounts, special deals, even personal favors. But the more he tried, the more desperate he sounded, and the more the clients began to see the truth. One by one, they started reaching out to me, asking about my new firm, expressing their frustration with the company's new direction. Some were angry, others just disappointed. But all of them wanted the same thing: someone they could trust. It wasn't long before the first client made the leap. I'll never forget the moment I got the call. It was late at night, and I was sitting in the office, exhausted but hopeful. My phone rang, and I saw the name flash on the screen, a client I'd worked with for years. "We're ready," he said simply. "We want to work with you." I felt a wave of relief and joy wash over me. It was the validation I needed, the proof that I was on the right path. But I also knew that with every client who left, the stakes were getting higher. Brandon wasn't going to let this go without a fight. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope. Every morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, wondering which client would call next, what new threat Brandon might send, and whether my new firm would survive another day. But with every challenge, I felt myself growing stronger, more determined. Maya and I worked side by side, sometimes late into the night, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. We celebrated every small victory. A new client email, a positive review, a word of encouragement from someone who believed in us. But we also braced ourselves for setbacks. There were days when clients hesitated, afraid of burning bridges with the old company. There were moments when I doubted myself, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But then something changed. It started with a single client, a small business owner named Mr. Patel. He'd always been loyal, but cautious. When he called me one afternoon, his voice was tense. "I got a call from Brandon," he said. "He told me you were trying to steal his clients. He said you were desperate." I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. "Mr. Patel, I would never ask you to do anything you're not comfortable with. I just want you to know that I'm here if you need me. That's all." There was a long pause. Then, quietly, he said, "I trust you. I always have. I just needed to hear it from you." That was the moment I realized the truth. Trust was my greatest weapon. Brandon could offer discounts and make threats, but he couldn't buy loyalty. He couldn't erase the years I'd spent building real relationships. Word began to spread. Clients started talking to each other, sharing their frustrations with the new management, their disappointment in the company's direction. Some even reached out to Maya, asking for advice on how to make the switch. It was like watching a dam break. One by one, clients began to leave the old company behind, choosing to work with us instead. Each new contract felt like a small act of justice, a quiet rebellion against the way I'd been treated. But with every client who left, Brandon's anger grew. He started sending more aggressive emails, threatening lawsuits, even calling my family to try and intimidate me. It was clear he was losing control, and he hated it. One night, after a particularly stressful day, Maya and I sat in our tiny office, surrounded by empty coffee cups and stacks of paperwork. She looked at me, her eyes tired but determined. "We're winning," she said softly, "but we have to be careful. He's not going to stop until he's lost everything." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I knew the real battle was just beginning. It didn't take long for Brandon to escalate his tactics. The next week, I received a thick envelope in the mail, legal documents filled with threats and accusations. He was suing me for breach of contract, claiming I'd stolen confidential information and poached clients. For a moment, I felt the old fear creeping back in. Lawsuits were expensive, time-consuming, and stressful. I didn't have the resources of a big company behind me anymore, but I refused to let Brandon see me sweat. I called Maya, and together we reviewed every document, every clause in my old contract. We consulted with a lawyer, a friend of Maya's, who agreed to help us for a fraction of the usual cost. He was calm and reassuring, pointing out that Brandon's case was weak. I hadn't taken any files, hadn't broken any laws. All I'd done was maintain relationships I'd built on my own time. Still, the lawsuit was a distraction. It took time and energy away from building the business. It made some clients nervous, worried they'd be dragged into the mess. Brandon knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to slow me down, to make me doubt myself, but I refused to give in. Instead, I doubled down on my work. I reached out to every client, explaining the situation honestly and calmly. I reassured them that their information was safe, that I would never put them at risk. Most of them understood. Some even offered to write letters of support, vouching for my integrity. The lawsuit dragged on for weeks, then months. But as time passed, it became clear that Brandon was losing ground. The clients kept coming, the business kept growing, and the old company was starting to feel the strain.